Welcome, Focus Learners, to this Explainer. We are diving straight into something absolutely fascinating today, and honestly, completely terrifying. We're talking about the razor-thin line between medical fact and horrifying physical evidence when it comes to sleep paralysis. And to really bring the visceral terror of these experiences to life, we're looking at 3 documented, true accounts through the lens of animated horror storytelling. It's the best way to truly grasp what these people went through. So let's just jump right in.
Imagine this for a second. Have you ever woken up in the dead of night, your eyes darting around the room, totally wide open? You see the moonlight on your floor. You hear the house settling. Your brain is 100% awake, but when you try to lift your arm, nothing. No matter how hard you push or try to scream or shift your weight, your body just flat out refuses to respond. You are literally trapped inside your own physical shell. Now, from a clinical standpoint, doctors neatly box this up as sleep paralysis. They assure us it's just a harmless sleep disorder, a scary little glitch where your brain wakes up before your body's sleep cycle actually finishes. And sure, that's a nice safety net, but what happens when the things you see during these episodes know things they absolutely shouldn't? What happens when these supposed hallucinations leave actual physical proof behind? Is it always just a medical glitch? Let's look at the evidence.
Case 1, the woman in the corner.
Okay, our source material kicks off with a 19-year-old girl who had just moved into her very first apartment. It was a simple, small studio unit on the edge of town. For the first month, she's living there completely alone, and everything's totally fine. But then, she starts waking up at exactly 3 a.m. every single night. At first, she figured, hey, it's just stress from college, right? Until one night, she opens her eyes, realizes she's entirely paralyzed, and she sees her. Animated horror maps out this agonizing progression so perfectly. Night 1, the entity is just standing in the corner. A woman, dead still with long black hair completely covering her face. The girl tries to write it off as a hallucination, but the next night, the woman is back and she's moved slightly closer. Night after night, the paralysis hits and the woman advances from the corner to the wall to the desk to the chair. It's this absolute masterclass in suspense buildup. Until finally the progression reaches its terrifying end. The woman is standing directly beside her bed.
And the terror doesn't just stay visual. It becomes this full-on sensory nightmare. Our source notes, she didn't just see this woman, she could hear her. And the breathing wasn't just close, it was slow, heavy, wet. Imagine your heart practically pounding out of your chest as this entity leans right down into your paralyzed face and starts whispering these completely unintelligible words. Just the sheer panic of hearing wet breathing right next to your ear while you can't move a single muscle, it's unimaginable.
But here is the absolute mic drop moment. The encounter is actually stopped after that night. But the source reveals something that completely shatters that harmless medical glitch theory. When the girl finally woke up the next morning and could actually move again, she found something resting right on her pillow. A long strand of black hair. Now remember, she lived completely alone. And her own hair? Short and brown. To this very day, she keeps that long black hair sealed up in a plastic bag. Why? Because half of her needs the proof that it actually happened, and the other half is absolutely terrified that it did.
Case 2, the thing under the bed.
So, our next source account seriously raises the stakes. We're introduced to Kevin, a guy who was actually pretty used to sleep paralysis. He knew the drill. Wake up, can't move, see some creepy shadows, go back to sleep. But one night, at 2:30 a.m., that routine completely broke. We are escalating this explainer from a misplaced object to actual physical destruction. Picture the room. Pitch black, just a sliver of moonlight. He realizes he's paralyzed again. And then, this slow, methodical sound starts coming from directly underneath his bed. Scratch, scratch, scratch. At first, logic tells him, okay, it's just a mouse. But the scratching gets louder, it gets closer, and it sounds heavy. Then, a pale hand slowly creeps out from beneath his bed. And the source makes a huge point here. The fingers were unnaturally long, like way longer than any human hand could ever be. It's the kind of impossible, twisted anatomy that animated horror storytelling captures so chillingly. Kevin tries to scream, but, paralyzed vocal cords. The hand slips back under. Dead silence. But then, the creature itself crawls out. It's twisted, bent in these literally impossible directions. It doesn't have any eyes, just this massive, horrifying smile stretching ear to ear. and this eyeless, grinning thing slowly climbs right up onto Kevin's mattress. It crawls closer and closer until that smiling face is just inches away from Kevin's. And then it speaks. "You're awake this time." Just let that sink in. Think about the bone-chilling implication of those words. It means this entity has a dark history. It means it's been there many, many times before, just watching him while he was actually asleep. The second it said that, Kevin somehow snapped out of the paralysis, bolted out of bed, and threw on every light in the house. The creature was gone. The next morning, Kevin is desperately trying to convince himself it was just textbook sleep paralysis, right? Just a really bad hallucination. But his room told a completely different story. Right underneath his bed, he found deep scratch marks violently carved into the hardwood floor. Marks that absolutely 100% had never been there before. The physical proof was just so undeniable and so terrifying that Kevin actually packed his bags and moved out 3 months later. He still gets sleep paralysis, but thankfully, the smiling creature hasn't come back. Case 3. The man who knew my name. All right, in our first 2 cases, we saw physical objects left behind and actual damage done to a room. But this final account from a woman named Sarah, it shifts the escalation away from physical evidence and straight into the realm of impossible, fatal premonitions. This is the one that just completely defies logic. Sarah lived at home with her parents in a quiet neighborhood. One night, she falls asleep around midnight and wakes up a few hours later. Total darkness, total paralysis. But standing right there in her open doorway is this massive entity, a figure at least 7 feet tall. The source describes it as being literally darker than the darkness around it, like a walking void. Sarah is trying desperately to look away, but her frozen body just forces her to watch as this towering shadow takes one slow step after another right up to her bed. The figure stops right beside her, and this is where the psychological terror really hits home. It didn't scream. It didn't attack her. Instead, in this perfectly calm voice, it spoke. It said her exact full name: first, middle, last. Sarah was gripped by pure, absolute terror. She had never seen this shadow before in her life. I mean, how could a hallucination generated by your own brain feel so completely alien? And more importantly, how could an unknown entity know her exact identity? But it wasn't done. After saying her full name, this massive shadow leans down over her paralyzed body and whispers something else right into her ear. It was just a date. A completely seemingly random date in the future. Nothing else, no context, no explanation. A few seconds later, the heavy paralysis lifts and the dark figure just vanishes into thin air. Now, the timeline of what happened next proves this was not just some bad dream. Sarah, like everyone else, tried her best to rationalize it. Months go by, her life goes completely back to normal. But then, that exact random date arrives on the calendar. On that precise morning, Sarah got a phone call. Her grandfather had unexpectedly passed away during the night. That impossible date, whispered by a 7-foot shadow while she was trapped in her own body, had become a tragic reality. She actually never told her family. She knew exactly how crazy it sounded, but she remembers that voice and that darkness to this very day. Beyond medical explanation. We've looked at the structured data behind these accounts, brilliantly brought to life through the engaging medium of animated horror. We know that sleep paralysis is a recognized, real medical condition, but the source material we've reviewed today leaves us staring at some incredibly difficult questions. Why do so many completely unconnected people report seeing the exact same types of shadow figures? And more importantly, what if not every sleep paralysis story can be neatly explained away by science? When a hallucination leaves a physical lock of hair on your pillow, or carves deep scratches into your floorboards, or literally predicts the exact date of a family member's death, can we really still confidently call that a simple sleep disorder? I highly encourage you to really think about these anomalies. These stories completely challenge our understanding of what actually happens when our conscious minds get trapped somewhere between sleeping and waking. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, diving into the unexplained. Think about the physical evidence we've unpacked today, and as you turn off your lights to go to sleep tonight, try not to look into the corner of your room. You really might not like what's staring back.